One waitress fed an elderly woman daily, until her CEO's son arrived with 20 SUVs. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. In a quiet corner of the city, there was a small diner that felt like home to many of its regulars. Among them was an elderly woman named Mrs. Wilkins, who had come to rely on the kindness of one particular waitress, Lily. Every day, like clockwork, Mrs. Wilkins would shuffle in, her frail frame supported by a cane, her eyes bright with a kind of resilience that came only from years of experience. Lily, who worked tirelessly at the diner, always made sure Mrs. Wilkins had the best seat by the window, a warm meal, and a smile to accompany it. It wasn't much, but for Lily, it was the least she could do. She had seen so much hardship in her own life, and she understood the value of kindness better than most. As the days passed, Lily and Mrs. Wilkins formed an unspoken bond. They would chat about the weather, the changing seasons, and sometimes, the things that mattered most to them: family. Mrs. Wilkins spoke of her children, who lived far away, always apologizing for their lack of visits. Lily listened patiently, offering comforting words, even though she knew that the elderly woman had long since given up expecting much from her family. For Lily, the moments with Mrs. Wilkins were a quiet reprieve from her own hectic life, where she juggled long shifts and bills that never seemed to stop piling up. One chilly winter afternoon, just as the diner was beginning to fill with the usual crowd, Mrs. Wilkins walked in as she always did. But this time, something was different. As Lily approached her table with a steaming cup of coffee, she noticed that Mrs. Wilkins was looking out the window, her face etched with a mix of surprise and curiosity. Lily followed her gaze and was taken aback by what she saw. A line of luxury cars, black SUVs, lined up on the street outside the diner. They were sleek, expensive, and completely out of place in this part of town. Before Lily could ask anything, the door to the diner swung open, and in walked a tall man, dressed in a sharp suit, his face partially obscured by sunglasses. He moved with the kind of confidence that immediately commanded attention. Behind him, several more men, all impeccably dressed, stepped inside. The group's presence filled the room with a sudden tension. Mrs. Wilkins looked up at the man, her eyes wide, as if recognizing him. "It can't be," she whispered under her breath, her voice trembling slightly. "Is that my son?" Lily's heart skipped a beat as she realized what was happening. She had seen Mrs. Wilkins talk about her children, but she had never once mentioned a son with such a commanding presence. The man scanned the room, his gaze landing on Mrs. Wilkins. Without a moment's hesitation, he walked over to her, kneeling down beside her chair. "Mom," he said softly, his voice betraying a mix of emotion and regret. Mrs. Wilkins blinked rapidly, as if trying to make sense of what was happening. "Jonathan?" she asked, her voice shaky. The man nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek as he gently took her hand in his. Lily stood frozen, unsure of what to make of this unexpected turn of events. What had started as an ordinary day at the diner had quickly turned into something far more complicated. Who was this man? Why had he stayed away for so long? And what was the connection to the fleet of SUVs parked outside? As Jonathan spoke to his mother, his words were filled with remorse, but Lily could hear the hint of tension in his tone. It was clear that there were unresolved issues between them. She had no idea how this would all unfold, but one thing was certain. The quiet world of Mrs. Wilkins and Lily was about to change forever. The man, Jonathan, stood there for a few moments, his hand still gently holding his mother's. The quiet in the diner seemed to stretch for an eternity, as if the world itself had paused. Mrs. Wilkins, still in disbelief, blinked again and again, trying to reconcile the image of the man before her with the son she hadn't seen in over 15 years. Her voice was faint, trembling as she spoke. "I never thought I'd see you again, Jonathan." After all these years, Jonathan's expression softened, guilt and sorrow painting his features as he sat down beside her. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I should have come sooner. I've been so caught up with work and everything. I've missed so much." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of absence. Lily stood in the background, unable to take her eyes off the scene unfolding before her. She had always known Mrs. Wilkins to be a strong, independent woman, but now, in the presence of her son, she appeared vulnerable, as though the years of solitude had finally caught up with her. Jonathan turned to Lily, noticing her standing there, observing the reunion. His sharp gaze softened slightly. "You must be Lily," he said, his tone changing. There was an unexpected warmth to it now. "My mother has mentioned you. Thank you for taking care of her all these years." Lily nodded, unsure of how to respond, her emotions conflicted. This man, the CEO of some big company, had been absent from his mother's life for so long. Yet here he was, now, surrounded by luxury, suddenly making his presence known in the most dramatic of ways. He had come in a line of expensive SUVs, a fleet that seemed so out of place in this humble diner. She didn't know what to make of it. Jonathan's eyes flicked to the windows briefly, as if reminding himself of the extravagant cars parked outside. "It's a bit much, isn't it?" he murmured, almost to himself. "But it was the only way I could get here without drawing attention." Lily, still processing the situation, was not sure whether to feel sympathy for the man or frustration at his sudden appearance. "I don't understand," she said quietly, her voice not as steady as usual. "If you care for your mother so much, why wait so long to come back? Why the luxury cars and all the attention?" Jonathan seemed to shrink under her gaze, his eyes downcast as he let out a heavy sigh. "I've been lost in my work, Lily. The truth is, I've been running away from the responsibility of family for so long, hiding behind the facade of success. I thought that if I kept achieving, I could fill the emptiness. But nothing ever worked. And now, here I am, realizing I've neglected the most important person in my life." Lily wasn't sure how to respond to that. She didn't know him, but she had watched Mrs. Wilkins over the years, always with a kind smile, always patient, always forgiving. Could a mother truly forgive the absence of her child? Mrs. Wilkins, sensing her son's struggle, gave him a soft smile, though it was tinged with sadness. "You came back, Jonathan," she said gently. "That's all that matters now. We can make up for lost time, together." Her words were simple, but they held a depth that Lily could feel deep in her chest. It was a reminder of the power of forgiveness and the bond of family that never truly disappears. Jonathan nodded, his eyes now filled with a mix of guilt and relief. He turned to Lily again, his expression changing. "I know this must seem sudden to you, and I'm sorry for that. But there's something I'd like to do for you, to thank you for everything you've done for my mother." Lily raised an eyebrow, not entirely sure where this conversation was going. She had helped Mrs. Wilkins because it was the right thing to do, not for any reward. "I'm not looking for anything, Jonathan," she said, shaking her head. "I've done what anyone would do for someone in need." Jonathan's gaze became more serious, his voice firm. "I insist," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "My company has resources. I want to ensure your future is secured. You've cared for my mother in ways I couldn't, and for that, you deserve more than just a simple thank you." Lily was taken aback by his words. She had worked in this diner for so long, never expecting anything more than a modest paycheck and the satisfaction of knowing she had made a difference in someone's life. And yet, here was a man offering her a future she never thought possible. "What are you offering?" she asked cautiously, unsure of how to proceed. Jonathan smiled, but it was tinged with a quiet sadness. "A fresh start," he said. "I want to help you start your own business. You've shown so much dedication, not just to my mother, but to everyone who walks through that door. You deserve to have the life you've always dreamed of." His words hit her like a wave, and for the first time in years, Lily found herself at a loss for words. She didn't know if she could accept this. Was she ready to leave behind the quiet life she had always known? Was she willing to accept help from a man who had, just hours ago, seemed like a stranger? As Lily stood there, silent, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "We'll help you, too, of course," Jonathan added, looking at his group of associates who had remained silent until now. "Whatever you need to make it happen, it's yours." The sudden change in her world felt overwhelming, but for the first time in a long time, Lily allowed herself to feel something she hadn't dared to feel before: hope. "I had no idea what to say." The words Jonathan had spoken hung in the air, his offer of a fresh start echoing in my mind like a distant bell. How could I even begin to process this? I had spent my life in the quiet comfort of the diner, where nothing ever changed, and now this man was offering me a chance to leave it all behind. A fresh start. A future. A life I had never even imagined for myself. It seemed too much, too fast. Mrs. Wilkins, watching the conversation unfold, smiled gently. "You should consider it, Lily," she said, her voice filled with wisdom. "You've been so kind to me all these years. You deserve something more." Her words were like a warm embrace, and for the first time, I allowed myself to think that maybe, just maybe, I could accept this chance. Jonathan watched me closely, his eyes full of something that looked like hope, but I wasn't sure if it was hope for me or hope for what he wanted me to become. I could see the weight of his guilt still hanging over him, the years of absence that couldn't be undone with a few kind words and a handful of money. "I understand this is a lot to take in," Jonathan said, his voice softer now. "I don't want to rush you, but I want to make sure you have every opportunity. I'm offering you something more than just a business. I'm offering you the chance to shape your own future." The air in the diner felt thick with the weight of his words. Everything around me, from the clinking of dishes to the hum of the refrigerator in the back, seemed to fade away. I glanced around the diner, at the familiar faces of the regular customers, at the worn counters and old booths. This place had always been my world, and the idea of leaving it behind was both thrilling and terrifying. "Why me?" I asked, my voice quiet, unsure of what to make of his offer. "I've seen how you care," Jonathan said, his tone earnest. "Not just for my mother, but for everyone who walks through this door. You treat them like family. You listen. You make them feel seen. That's rare. And I want to help people like you. People who don't just want to make money, but want to make a difference." I swallowed hard. His words were flattering, but they also felt like pressure. Could I live up to what he was asking? Could I really step into a world so different from the one I had known? "I don't know," I whispered, my heart racing. "I've spent so many years just getting by, doing what I can to survive. How can I just turn my back on all of that?" Jonathan leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving mine. "Lily, I'm not asking you to turn your back on anything. I'm asking you to take a chance on yourself. To take what you've already built here and turn it into something bigger. Something that can help others, just like you've helped my mother. You've always had the ability to make a difference. Now you'll just have the resources to do it on a larger scale." His words hit me like a wave, crashing over my doubts and fears, sweeping them away, if only for a moment. But the doubt quickly crept back in, and I couldn't help but wonder, what would this change mean for me? Would I still be the same person if I stepped into a life I had never known? I glanced over at Mrs. Wilkins, who was watching us with an expression of quiet understanding. She had always been the one to offer advice, the one who had seen so much of life's struggles and still managed to find peace. "You've always known what's best for me," I said softly, almost to myself. "And maybe you're right. Maybe I deserve more than this." Mrs. Wilkins smiled at me, her eyes twinkling with the kindness that had always been a part of her. "Lily, life is full of unexpected turns. It's never too late to take a chance on something new, and you don't have to do it alone. You've got people who believe in you, who will help you every step of the way." Jonathan's expression softened as he looked at me. "You don't have to decide right now, but when you're ready, I'll be here. I'm offering you the opportunity of a lifetime, Lily. I want to see you succeed, but I won't pressure you." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Could I really walk away from the diner? Could I embrace this new life that Jonathan was offering, a life of success, of opportunity, of change? Or was I too afraid to leave behind the only world I had ever known? As I looked out the window at the quiet street, I realized something. It wasn't just about the diner. It wasn't just about staying in the life I had known. It was about the person I wanted to become, the future I wanted to create for myself. And maybe, just maybe, this offer was the push I needed to finally take that first step toward it. With a sense of resolve building inside me, I looked up at Jonathan. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady now. "But I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to see where this could take me." Jonathan smiled, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in him before, genuine hope. "That's all I can ask for, Lily. Take your time, and when you're ready, I'll be here." As he stood up to leave, I felt the weight of the decision still lingering in my chest, but also something else, possibility. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to think that maybe, just maybe, I was ready for a change. I spent the next few days in a haze, my mind racing with questions, doubts, and a sense of wonder I had never allowed myself to feel before. Every time I passed the diner, I couldn't shake the thought of Jonathan's offer. It had felt too sudden, too grand to be real, but there was a part of me that couldn't ignore the truth in his words. He had seen something in me that I had never seen in myself, and that realization, terrifying as it was, left me with a sense of responsibility. I had spent so many years just getting by, surviving from paycheck to paycheck, that the idea of change felt foreign and unsettling. But then, there was Mrs. Wilkins, her quiet wisdom reminding me that sometimes, life gave you a chance, and you had to take it. I couldn't keep running from possibilities. I had to face the future, even if it scared me. On the third day after Jonathan's visit, I sat at my usual spot in the diner, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. It was a slow morning, and the usual group of regulars had yet to fill the place. The warmth of the diner, the smell of fresh-baked bread, and the low hum of the refrigerator were comforting, but there was something different now. I had changed, and the world outside the diner, the one I had always kept at arm's length, was now part of my reality. Mrs. Wilkins, as always, sat at her table by the window, her eyes scanning the street outside, as if waiting for something, or perhaps someone. I approached her, and she looked up, her face breaking into a soft smile. "You've been thinking about it, haven't you, dear?" she asked gently, her voice as comforting as the afternoon sun. I nodded, taking a seat across from her. "I have," I said quietly. "I don't know if I'm ready for it. I've spent my whole life here, in this place. It feels like I'm betraying everything I've worked for." Mrs. Wilkins chuckled softly, the sound warm and knowing. "You're not betraying anything, Lily. You're simply giving yourself the chance to grow. You've already done so much for others. It's time you did something for yourself." Her words, simple as they were, hit me harder than I expected. I had always put others first, but in doing so, I had forgotten about myself, forgotten what it meant to dream beyond the boundaries of the life I had known. Mrs. Wilkins reached across the table, placing her frail hand on mine. "I know it's scary," she said, "but you don't have to do it alone. You have people who care about you. You can make a difference, not just here, but out there, too." I squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of her kindness and wisdom. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilkins. I think you're right. It's time for me to take a chance." That evening, after my shift, I found myself walking through the city streets, my thoughts consumed by the decision I had made. It wasn't just about the diner anymore. It was about me, about the woman I could become if I was brave enough to step into the unknown. As I walked, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me, as if the decision had already been made for me long ago, and I was just now catching up. The following morning, I called Jonathan. The conversation was brief, but I could hear the relief in his voice when I told him that I was ready. "I'm glad," he said, his tone warm. "I'll make the arrangements, Lily. You'll have everything you need to get started." True to his word, within the week, I was sitting in an office I could never have imagined for myself. It was sleek and modern, a far cry from the diner, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Jonathan had made good on his promise. The room felt foreign to me, but at the same time, it felt like the first step towards something new. I spent the next few weeks learning the ropes, getting familiar with the business world that had once seemed so out of reach. Jonathan was there every step of the way, guiding me, supporting me, and pushing me to think bigger. It was hard work, but it was rewarding in a way I had never experienced before. I was finally starting to see myself as someone who could make a difference, someone who could change lives, starting with my own. But as I spent more time in this new world, I began to notice something. Despite the success and opportunities, I missed the simplicity of the diner, the quiet rhythm of the life I had left behind. Mrs. Wilkins' voice echoed in my mind, reminding me of the importance of staying grounded, of remembering where I came from. And so, I made a promise to myself. No matter how far I went, no matter how much success I found, I would always remember the lessons I had learned at that small diner. I would never forget the people who had helped me along the way, and I would always strive to make a difference, no matter how small. It wasn't just about the money or the power. It was about helping others, just as I had helped Mrs. Wilkins. And as I stood in that office, looking out at the city that was now mine to navigate, I knew that I had taken the first step toward the future I had always dreamed of. But more importantly, I knew that I had found the courage to step into it, with the hope that one day, I could help others do the same. I spent the next few months adjusting to the whirlwind that had become my life. The transition from the quiet comfort of the diner to the fast-paced world of business was a challenge, but it was one I had willingly accepted. I quickly learned that there were countless moving parts in Jonathan's world, and every decision, no matter how small, had far-reaching consequences. Despite the pressure, there was something exhilarating about it all. I had always been someone who preferred to stay behind the scenes, quietly doing what I could for others, but now I was learning to step into the spotlight, to take ownership of my actions, and to lead. With Jonathan's guidance, I began to understand the intricacies of running a business. I worked alongside his team, learning everything from market analysis to financial projections. At first, it felt overwhelming, but with each new lesson, I grew more confident. I started to see the bigger picture, how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together. It wasn't just about making money. It was about creating something that could make a difference. I knew that what I had learned in the diner, the importance of kindness and human connection, could be translated into this new world. But even as I thrived in this new environment, something was missing. I missed the simplicity of the diner, the quiet moments with Mrs. Wilkins, and the sense of purpose that came with small, meaningful acts of kindness. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting, I found myself walking through the city, searching for something I couldn't quite name. I walked down familiar streets, past storefronts and coffee shops, until I found myself standing outside the diner. The warm glow from the inside felt like a welcome embrace. It was strange to be back after all the changes. I had only visited a handful of times since I had started working with Jonathan, but today something pulled me inside. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, and for a moment, it felt as though nothing had changed. The same comforting smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. The familiar faces of the regulars were seated at their usual tables, and there, sitting in her corner by the window, was Mrs. Wilkins. She looked up as I walked in, a gentle smile spreading across her face. "Lily," she said, her voice warm. "It's good to see you back." I smiled and made my way to her table. "It's good to be back, Mrs. Wilkins." I sat down across from her, feeling a sense of peace that I hadn't realized I had been missing. We chatted for a while, about the weather, the latest news in the diner, and how life had been treating her. It was easy to slip back into the rhythm of our conversations, and I realized just how much I had missed this simple, human connection. As we talked, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. The business world had offered me opportunities one never thought possible, but it had also come with its own set of challenges and compromises. There were times when I felt out of place, like I was trying to fit into a world that didn't quite align with who I was. And yet, sitting here with Mrs. Wilkins, I realized that the values that had always guided me, the kindness, the empathy, the sense of community, were just as important in the business world as they were in the diner. In fact, they might be more important. I could make a difference in a bigger way, but I had to stay true to myself and the lessons I had learned here. As I stood up to leave, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I didn't have to choose between the two worlds. I could bring the best of both together. I could create something meaningful, not just for myself, but for others as well. Jonathan had given me the tools to build a future, but it was up to me to decide what that future would look like. I knew now that it wasn't just about climbing to the top, but about how I could lift others up along the way. As I walked out of the diner, the door jingling behind me, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was mine to walk. And I was ready to lead, ready to create, but most importantly, ready to stay true to who I was, and never forget where I came from. I spent the next few weeks diving into my new role, trying to balance the lessons from the business world with the values that had always grounded me. Jonathan was there every step of the way, offering guidance and support, but as time passed, I began to realize something. Despite all the progress, despite the new opportunities, something still felt missing. I was succeeding in a world that felt foreign to me, and though I was learning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing a part of myself in the process. The diner, the people, the simple acts of kindness, it all seemed so distant now. One evening, after a particularly grueling meeting, I decided to take a walk. The city's bustling energy overwhelmed me at times, but walking through the quieter parts helped me center myself. As I strolled down the familiar streets, my thoughts consumed by the weight of my decisions, I found myself standing outside the diner once more. The sight of it, with its warm lights glowing in the dark, pulled me inside like a magnetic force. I hadn't been back in a while, and the nostalgia hit me hard as soon as I stepped through the door. The smell of coffee and fresh bread, the hum of quiet conversation. It was like stepping back in time. Mrs. Wilkins was sitting in her usual spot by the window, a place that had become as much a part of the diner as the worn countertops and clinking glasses. She looked up when I entered, and her face lit up with a knowing smile. "I knew you'd come back, Lily," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. I walked over and sat down across from her, taking a deep breath as I let the comfort of the familiar settle over me. "I've been thinking a lot," I began, my voice quieter than usual. "I'm not sure if I'm making the right choices anymore. Everything's moving so fast, and I don't feel like I'm really doing what I'm meant to do." Mrs. Wilkins nodded slowly, her wise eyes never leaving mine. "It's normal to feel that way," she said, her tone calm and reassuring. "But you're not alone. You've already made a difference in so many lives. Sometimes, you just need to remind yourself why you started." Her words echoed in my mind, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. I had come so far, but I had lost sight of the reasons I had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't about the money or the power. It was about making a difference, just like I had done in the diner, helping people and offering kindness. Mrs. Wilkins smiled again, as if she had sensed the shift in my thoughts. "You're stronger than you think, Lily," she said. "The world needs people like you. People who can see beyond the numbers and the bottom line. Never forget that." As I sat there, I realized that the life I had created for myself didn't have to be a contradiction. I could still be the person who cared, who made a difference, even in the business world. I could merge the two worlds, bringing the same level of empathy and compassion that I had given to Mrs. Wilkins into my new ventures. The diner would always be a part of me, a reminder of where I came from and why I had started this journey. The next day, I called Jonathan. He answered on the first ring, as always. "Lily," he said warmly, "how are you?" "I've been thinking," I began, my voice steady now, "and I've realized something. I don't have to choose between the two worlds. I can bring the values I've learned here into the work I'm doing now. I want to build a business that makes a real impact, not just for the people at the top, but for everyone." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Jonathan spoke, his voice full of understanding. "I'm proud of you, Lily," he said. "That's exactly what I wanted for you. I knew you'd figure it out." His words, though simple, filled me with a sense of pride that I hadn't felt before. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living my truth. Over the next few months, I worked hard to bring this new vision to life. Jonathan supported me, of course, but I took the lead in shaping the direction of the projects we were working on. I ensured that everything we did, whether it was a new investment or a partnership, aligned with the values I had learned. I brought in people who shared my vision, people who cared about more than just profits, and together, we started to build something meaningful. Slowly but surely, I saw the results. Our work made a difference in the lives of the people we worked with, and that was more rewarding than any deal I had ever closed. But through it all, I never lost sight of the most important lesson I had learned, that kindness and human connection were the real keys to success. As I stood in the conference room one afternoon, looking out at the city below, I realized that I had found the balance I had been searching for. I wasn't just in the business of making money. I was in the business of making a difference. And that was all I had ever wanted. I had been working hard for months, building a business that I believed in. With Jonathan's support, I had created something that not only made a difference in people's lives, but also aligned with the values I had always cherished. But no matter how much I achieved, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't fully faced the past. I had left the diner behind, but a part of me still clung to it, to the woman I had been before the business world had swept me up. One afternoon, as I walked through the office, I found myself pausing at the large windows that overlooked the city. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the skyline. It was beautiful, but it felt distant, like I was looking at someone else's life. That was when I realized it was time to go back. Not just to the diner, but to the essence of what had driven me to succeed in the first place. It wasn't the money or the accolades. It was the people. It was Mrs. Wilkins, the regulars at the diner, the small acts of kindness that had made me feel like I was truly making a difference. I needed to reconnect with that. I needed to remember who I was. The next morning, I drove to the diner, the familiar streets bringing a sense of calm I hadn't realized I had been missing. As I walked in, the bell above the door jingled, and for the first time in months, I felt a rush of familiarity. The sound of clinking plates, the smell of fresh coffee, the warm glow of the diner. It was everything I had left behind. And yet, in that moment, it felt like it had never really left me. Mrs. Wilkins looked up from her usual spot by the window and smiled as I walked toward her. She looked as though she had been expecting me, her eyes filled with that same wisdom I had always trusted. "I knew you'd be back," she said gently. "There's always something in life that pulls you back to where you started." I smiled, feeling a wave of emotion wash over me. "I've learned a lot, Mrs. Wilkins," I said, sitting down across from her. "But I've also realized that I need to stay true to who I am. The business world is great, but I can't forget the heart of what I do." She nodded, her gaze warm and understanding. "That's why you've done so well," she said. "Because you've never lost sight of what matters. You just needed a little reminder." I sat there for a while, talking with Mrs. Wilkins, reconnecting with the values that had always been a part of me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a deep sense of peace. It wasn't about making the next big deal or climbing higher in the business world. It was about the connections I made, the difference I could bring to people's lives. After that day, I made a promise to myself. I would continue building the business, but I would also stay grounded in what truly mattered. I started implementing new initiatives at work, programs that gave back to the community, that helped people like Mrs. Wilkins and the regulars at the diner. I brought people from all walks of life into the fold, making sure that kindness and empathy were at the core of everything we did. The change wasn't instant, but slowly, I began to feel like I had found the balance I had been searching for. As I spent more time in both worlds, I realized that they didn't have to be separate. The values I had carried with me from the diner, the ones I had learned from the people I had met there, could be woven into the fabric of the business I was building. It was a slow process, but it felt right. And as I stood in the office one evening, looking out at the city below, I finally understood. Success wasn't about being the best or having the most. It was about making an impact, about helping others, and about staying true to who you are, no matter where life takes you. I had come a long way since that moment in the diner, where I had reconnected with the person I used to be. My life had changed in ways I never imagined, but now, I could finally see the bigger picture. Jonathan's world, the business world, had once seemed so overwhelming, but now it felt like part of my own journey. I had learned to embrace it, to build something that not only made a difference, but was also true to my heart. The balance I had been searching for was beginning to take shape. But with all the progress, there was still a lingering question in my mind. How could I continue to grow without losing myself again? It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when I received a call that would change everything. I had been working late in the office, reviewing a new partnership proposal, when my phone buzzed. The caller ID was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end was unmistakable. "Lily, it's Mrs. Wilkins." I sat up straight, surprised to hear from her. "Mrs. Wilkins, is everything okay?" I asked, concern creeping into my voice. There was a pause before she spoke again, her tone soft but urgent. "I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come by the diner tomorrow?" My heart sank a little. Mrs. Wilkins rarely called for anything serious, and her words made it clear that something was troubling her. "Of course," I said quickly. "I'll be there first thing in the morning." The next day, I arrived at the diner as promised, the familiar bell above, the door jingling as I stepped inside. The warmth of the place greeted me, but it felt different somehow, like a storm was quietly brewing just beneath the surface. Mrs. Wilkins was sitting at her usual spot by the window, but today her eyes were filled with something I hadn't seen before, worry. I walked over and took a seat across from her. "What's going on, Mrs. Wilkins?" I asked gently. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "I've been keeping something from you, Lily," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been feeling this way for a while, but I didn't want to burden you. But now, I think it's time you know." I could feel my heart race as I waited for her to continue. Mrs. Wilkins had always been strong, unshakable, even in the face of everything life had thrown at her. For her to sound so vulnerable was both alarming and heartbreaking. You see, Lily, I've been sick. For some time now. My breath caught in my throat. Sick, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving mine. I didn't want to tell anyone, not even my children. I thought I could handle it, but... She trailed off, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. The doctors say it's advanced, Lily. I don't have much time left. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't process what she was saying. Mrs. Wilkins, the woman who had always been there for everyone else, was facing her own battle now. The thought of losing her, of not having her in my life, was unimaginable. I don't know what to say. I whispered, my eyes welling with tears. You don't have to say anything, Lily. I've lived a full life. I've had more than my share of love and joy. But there's one thing I need to ask of you. I wiped my eyes, trying to keep my composure. Anything, Mrs. Wilkins. You know I'll do whatever I can. She smiled softly, the lines on her face deepening with the weight of her years. I want you to promise me something, Lily, she said, her voice steady. I want you to keep going. Keep building your business. Keep helping others, just like you've always done. Don't let anything stop you. Don't. Let my passing be the end of your journey. I stared at her, not fully understanding. But I don't want to lose you, I said, my voice breaking. I know, she replied gently. But sometimes, life takes us in directions we don't expect. And you, Lily, you've already come so far. I want you to live the life you've dreamed of, to help others in ways I could never do. You have so much potential. Don't let fear hold you back. Her words sank in, slowly, like a seed being planted in my heart. It wasn't just about the business. It was about living a life of purpose, a life that was bigger than any one person, any one moment. Mrs. Wilkins had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And now, as she faced the end of her own journey, she was giving me the courage to continue mine. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her request. I promise, I said softly. I'll keep going. I'll make sure your legacy, your kindness, lives on in everything I do. Mrs. Wilkins' eyes sparkled with a quiet satisfaction. That's all I needed to hear, she said, her voice filled with peace. You've always had the strength to do this, Lily. I'm just glad you're finally seeing it for yourself. As I left the diner that day, I felt something shift inside of me. It wasn't just the promise I had made to Mrs. Wilkins, it was a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let fear or uncertainty hold me back anymore. I was going to live a life that mattered, a life that made a difference, just like she had. And though the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, I knew I wasn't walking it alone. I woke up early the next morning, feeling the weight of the promise I had made to Mrs. Wilkins. Her words echoed in my mind as I went through my morning routine. The world outside my window seemed brighter somehow, as if it was reflecting the new direction my life had taken. I had always struggled with self-doubt, always wondering if I was good enough, if I was truly capable of doing something bigger. But now, I had Mrs. Wilkins' blessing, her trust in me, and I knew that I couldn't let her down. I couldn't let myself down either. I had made a commitment to keep pushing forward, to continue building something meaningful, not just for myself, but for others. And that meant stepping fully into my future, not just as a businesswoman, but as someone who could make a lasting impact. That morning, I went into the office with a new sense of purpose. Jonathan noticed the change immediately. As soon as I stepped into the conference room, he looked up from his papers, a curious expression on his face. Lily, you look different today, he said with a slight smile. What's going on? I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of clarity I hadn't felt before. I'm ready to do more, I said firmly. I've been thinking about what I really want to achieve. It's not just about the next big deal or the next step in the business world. It's about making a real difference. Jonathan raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. What do you have in mind? He asked. I want to build something that gives back, I explained. I want to make sure that everything we do, every project we take on, has a positive impact on people's lives. We've done well, but I think we can do even better. I want to create opportunities for those who don't have the same advantages we do. I want to create programs that help people in need, whether it's through education, job opportunities, or community support. Jonathan was silent for a moment, clearly processing what I had said. Then, a smile slowly spread across his face. I've always known you had a bigger vision, Lily, he said, his voice filled with admiration. And I'm with you. Let's do it. Let's make a difference. That was all I needed to hear. I felt a surge of energy and excitement rush through me. We spent the next few hours brainstorming ideas, discussing how we could make this vision a reality. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But it was the right thing to do, and I knew that it would be worth it. As the day wore on, I found myself looking at the business in a whole new light. Every decision I made, every action I took, was now aligned with the values I had learned from Mrs. Wilkins and from my time working in the diner. I wasn't just working to make money. I was working to make a difference. By the end of the week, we had put together a plan to launch our first initiative, a program that would provide job training and mentorship to young adults in underprivileged communities. It felt like a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. The excitement and anticipation were palpable as we prepared to roll out the program. I knew that this was only the beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. As the weeks passed, I threw myself into the project, learning as much as I could and doing everything I could to make it a success. It wasn't easy. There were challenges and setbacks, and there were moments when I doubted myself. But with each small victory, I gained more confidence. And with each life we touched, I knew that I was on the right path. One afternoon, I received a call from Mrs. Wilkins. Her voice, though frail, was filled with pride. "Lily, I hear about the work you're doing. I'm so proud of you," she said softly. "You've always had it in you. Don't forget to take care of yourself too, though. You've been giving so much to others. Remember to keep a little for yourself." Her words brought a smile to my face, and for a moment, I allowed myself to just feel the warmth of her support. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilkins," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm doing this because of you. You've shown me what really matters." As I hung up the phone, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was doing exactly what I was meant to do. I was making a difference, and I would continue to do so, no matter the obstacles. I was ready for whatever the future held, because I knew that with each step, I was moving closer to the person I had always wanted to be. The person who could make a real impact, who could change lives, and who could continue to grow, both in business and in heart. I woke up the next morning feeling the weight of the new responsibility on my shoulders. The job training initiative had launched successfully, and the first round of candidates had begun to arrive. We were already making a tangible impact, and it felt incredible to see it all come together. Yet, as the days passed, I began to feel something I hadn't expected: fear. It wasn't the fear of failure, it was the fear of success. The more we accomplished, the more I realized how high the stakes had become. I had never imagined that a simple act of kindness would lead to a life like this. Working in a high-powered business environment, leading social impact projects, and facing decisions that affected more people than I had ever thought possible. For the first time in my life, I was truly accountable, not just to myself, but to the lives we were changing. As the weeks went by, I found myself in more and more meetings, navigating complex partnerships and contracts. I was constantly learning, constantly growing, but I was also exhausted. The energy that had once come so naturally to me, when I worked the long shifts at the diner, taking care of everyone who walked through the door, was starting to wane. I had worked so hard to prove myself, but now that I was here, I felt like I was at the edge of something big, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. That night, as I sat in my office alone, I looked out the window at the lights of the city below. Everything had changed so quickly, and yet, something about it still didn't feel quite right. I had succeeded in the business world. I had made a difference. But at what cost? I had to admit that there were moments when I missed the simplicity of the diner, the quiet comfort of knowing that the people I helped were always right there, within arm's reach. The people I worked with now were no longer just faces in the crowd. They were individuals with their own ambitions, their own desires. I wasn't just serving food anymore. I was serving ideas, ambitions, corporate agendas. And in the midst of it all, I wasn't sure if I had lost sight of what truly mattered. It was then that I got a call from Jonathan. "Lily, are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm, but there was an edge of concern. "You've been quiet lately. I know you've been busy, but you've barely said a word in the last few meetings." I sat up straight, suddenly aware of how much I had been bottling up. "I don't know, Jonathan," I said, my voice quieter than usual. "I feel like I'm losing something important. I'm making an impact, I know that. But sometimes, I just don't know if it's enough." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Jonathan spoke again. Lily, you've done more than most people ever will. You've helped change lives. But you're human. You can't do it all by yourself. I bit my lip, feeling the weight of his words. He was right. I couldn't do it all. I had tried to carry everything on my shoulders, convinced that if I just worked harder, I could fix everything. But even I had limits. I think I need a break, I admitted, the words coming out almost as a relief. I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Jonathan. I don't know where I'm supposed to go from here. Jonathan's voice softened. It's okay to take a step back. You've already achieved more than most people do in a lifetime. You don't have to keep proving yourself. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. I just need to find my center again. I've been so caught up in all of this. I don't know who I am anymore. Jonathan didn't respond immediately, but I could hear him breathing, as if processing my words. Finally, he spoke. Then take the time you need. We'll handle things here. But don't lose sight of what's truly important. You've always known what mattered most, Lily. Don't forget that. I sat there for a long while, the quiet of the room settling around me like a heavy blanket. His words sank in slowly, and I realized that it wasn't just about the business or the success or the accolades. It was about staying grounded, staying true to myself. I had been so focused on building something bigger that I had forgotten why I wanted to build it in the first place. It was never about the title or the money. It was always about helping others, about making a real difference in the world. I had to find that balance again. A few days later, I returned to the diner, needing to reconnect with the roots of everything I had built. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside, and instantly, I felt the familiar comfort wash over me. Mrs. Wilkins was sitting in her usual spot, her eyes twinkling when she saw me. Lily, she said, her voice warm. It's good to see you back. I sat down beside her, feeling the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. We didn't speak much at first. We just sat together, enjoying the simple quiet of the moment. And for the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. I realized that no matter how much I had achieved, I was still the same person who had worked here, the same person who cared about others. That was who I was meant to be. I wasn't just a businesswoman. I was someone who cared about making the world a better place, one small act at a time. And I wasn't going to let go of that. I would continue building, continue growing, but I would always stay true to who I was, to the heart of everything I had done. I knew now that I didn't have to choose between success and kindness. I could have both. And that was the future I wanted to create. I had spent so much time focusing on the next steps, on the growth, the impact, and the projects, that I had forgotten something crucial, the importance of pause. After my conversation with Jonathan, after returning to the diner, I realized that I needed to slow down, reflect, and ensure that my actions were aligned with my true purpose. I had spent years building something, but I hadn't fully recognized the power of balance until now. The diner was more than just a place where I had started. It had always been a reminder of the simple, yet powerful way I could make a difference. As I sat there with Mrs. Wilkins, I felt the weight of the world slowly lifting off my shoulders. She had a way of making everything seem clearer. She always had. You've done so much already, Lily, she said one afternoon, her voice steady and filled with warmth. But you can't keep going without taking care of yourself. It's not about how fast you go. It's about making sure you're still on the right path. Her words resonated deeply within me. I had always thought of success as a race, a constant pursuit of more, of bigger. But now I saw it differently. Success wasn't just about achieving. It was about fulfilling the purpose that had driven me all along. Mrs. Wilkins smiled, sensing the shift in my mindset. You've learned something valuable, she said softly. The world will still be there tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. But if you lose yourself in the chase, what's the point? Her wisdom settled in my heart like a seed, and I knew that I needed to take a step back, not to stop, but to recalibrate. Over the next few weeks, I focused on creating a sustainable path forward, one where the business could thrive without losing the core values that had made it successful. I worked closely with my team to ensure that we were not just making profits, but also creating programs that truly helped people, programs that aligned with the vision I had originally set out with. We started an initiative that focused on mentorship for small business owners, offering resources, advice, and support to people just getting started. We partnered with local organizations to provide scholarships and job training, especially for those in underprivileged communities. It was everything I had always wanted to do, but now it was happening on a much larger scale. Yet, in all this progress, there was still something I needed to confront. Despite all the good we were doing, I realized I had been avoiding the one thing that had initially motivated me, the desire to make my own life better. I had been so focused on helping others that I had neglected to give myself permission to thrive. One afternoon, I decided to take a break from the usual rush of meetings and deadlines. I went for a walk, something I hadn't done in weeks. The fresh air and the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other helped me clear my mind. I realized that I had been so caught up in my work, in the responsibility to help others, that I had neglected my own growth. Helping others was important, but it wasn't enough to neglect myself. In order to give more, I had to ensure that I was also nurturing my own well-being. It was time to take control of my own happiness. When I returned to the office, I knew I had to make some changes. It wasn't about doing less work. It was about doing the work that truly fulfilled me. I decided to take on fewer projects, focusing on those that aligned most with my values. I also made more time for the things that brought me joy outside of work, spending time with friends and family, taking up hobbies that had always interested me, and reconnecting with the parts of myself that I had ignored. Jonathan noticed the change right away. One evening, he looked up from his desk and said, "You've been different lately, Lily." In a good way. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. "I've realized something," I said. "It's not just about achieving things. It's about feeling fulfilled in the process. I can't pour from an empty cup, and if I'm going to keep helping others, I have to make sure I'm taking care of myself too." Jonathan nodded in understanding. "That's the secret, isn't it?" he said with a smile. "Balance. You can't do it all at once, and you can't do it alone. But when you find the right balance, everything falls into place." And in that moment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't just chasing success anymore. I was embracing it in a way that felt right for me. With each passing day, I found more clarity in my purpose. The work I was doing was meaningful, but it was only one part of the equation. The other part, taking care of myself, was just as important. In the weeks that followed, I felt more grounded and more confident in the direction I was headed. I had learned how to balance my ambitions with my well-being, and I knew that I was on the right path. The business continued to grow, but so did I. And as I walked through life, I realized that this was the true meaning of success. Not just in what we achieve, but in the person we become along the way. I had been working tirelessly for months, balancing the needs of the business with my desire to make a difference. But something was missing. I had spent so much time focusing on the external, on the projects, the team, the impact, that I had almost forgotten to take stock of my own internal growth. It wasn't just about the programs we were launching, the partnerships we were forming, or the money we were making. I realized that, in all my pursuit of success, I had neglected my own well-being once again. The truth was, I had been so eager to help others that I hadn't paused to ask myself what I truly needed. As I reflected on this, I realized that I had a choice. I could continue pushing forward, working endlessly toward bigger and better goals, or I could take a moment to reset and find the balance I had been searching for. It was time to stop running on autopilot. It was time to put myself first, just for a while. After all, what good would it do anyone if I wasn't in a place where I could give my best? One evening, as I sat at my desk, going through a stack of papers, the phone rang. It was Jonathan. "Lily," he said, his voice warm, but there was something different in his tone. "I think it's time you took a step back. You've been pushing yourself too hard. We've all noticed it." I paused for a moment, surprised at his directness. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice quiet. Jonathan's words were measured, as if he had been thinking about this for a while. "You've been doing incredible work, but I can see that you're running on empty. You've been so focused on others that you've forgotten the most important person to take care of is you. I know you want to keep pushing, but you're not going to be any good to anyone if you burn out." His words hit me hard, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I had been running myself ragged, thinking that the more I did, the more impact I could have. But in reality, I had been neglecting the one thing that made everything else possible, my own health and well-being. I hadn't realized how much I've been pushing myself, I admitted, feeling a wave of exhaustion settle over me. "I don't want to disappoint anyone, Jonathan. I feel like if I stop now, I'll lose everything I've worked for." Jonathan's voice softened, and I could hear the concern in his words. "Lily, you're not going to lose everything. You've built something real, something meaningful. But you need to recharge, to remember why you started all of this in the first place. You need to take care of yourself first. I sat in silence for a moment, letting his words sink in. It was hard to accept that I needed a break, but deep down, I knew he was right. The pressure I had put on myself was immense, and it was starting to show. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first began this journey. I had lost touch with the passion that had driven me. It wasn't about the business anymore. It was about rediscovering who I was and why I was doing all of this. I think you're right, I said finally, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. Maybe I do need a break. But I'm scared. I'm scared that if I stop, everything will fall apart. Jonathan's voice was firm and reassuring. You've built a strong foundation, Lily. It won't fall apart. And you know what? You deserve this time to yourself. You've earned it. So go ahead, take that break. When you come back, you'll be stronger, clearer, and ready to make an even bigger impact. I hung up the phone that night with a sense of relief I hadn't felt in a long time. I had made the decision to take time for myself, to step away from the pressure of work and the constant drive for success. It was a difficult decision, but it was the right one. The next few weeks were a blur of rest, reflection, and rediscovery. I spent time with my family, reconnected with old friends, and even picked up hobbies I had long neglected. I didn't check emails, I didn't attend meetings, and I didn't think about the business. Instead, I focused on myself, on finding the balance that I had lost. During this time, I came to a realization. I had been so afraid of losing my sense of purpose that I had forgotten what truly mattered. It wasn't just about the business or the accolades or the recognition. It was about the people, the connections, and the small acts of kindness that made life meaningful. I needed to come back to that, to the essence of why I started this journey in the first place. And so, when I returned to work, it wasn't with a sense of pressure or urgency. It was with a renewed sense of purpose. I was still the same person, the one who cared deeply about making a difference. But now, I knew that I couldn't do it alone. I couldn't do it without taking care of myself first. I wasn't going to burn out again. I was going to thrive, and in doing so, help others thrive too. The next chapter of my journey wasn't about doing more. It was about doing things with intention, with heart, and with balance. And with that, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. Months had passed since I made the decision to focus on myself and the core values that had brought me to this point. The work continued, but now I approached it with a different perspective. I had rediscovered the balance I had once lost, and in doing so, I had found a sense of peace I hadn't realized I was missing. The business was thriving, the social initiatives were making a tangible difference, and I was finally at a place where I could be proud of what I was doing, not because of the recognition or the success, but because of the impact it had on people's lives. It was a quiet, fulfilling kind of success. I had created something meaningful, and I knew it wasn't just the work itself, but the journey that mattered most. One evening, as I sat in my office, reviewing the latest updates on our community programs, I received a call from Jonathan. Lily, we need to talk, he said, his voice serious but warm. I could sense the anticipation in his tone. Sure, what's going on? I asked, setting aside my papers. I've been thinking a lot about everything, he said. You've done incredible things with this business, but I think it's time for something new, something bigger. I want to take everything we've built and bring it to the next level. I sat back in my chair, feeling a spark of excitement. What do you have in mind? Jonathan hesitated for a moment before answering. I'm talking about scaling, expanding our social impact on a national level. We've touched so many lives already, but I think we can do more. I'm ready to back you, Lily. This is your vision. Let's take it even further. The excitement that bubbled up inside me was quickly tempered by a wave of uncertainty. It was a huge step, one that would require everything I had learned, but also everything I had yet to learn. I had to make sure that the work I was so passionate about didn't get lost in the noise of expansion. It's a big decision, I said slowly, considering the scope of what he was proposing. But I think it's the right one. I've been wanting to take this to the next level for a while now. I just need to make sure we stay true to what really matters. Jonathan's voice softened with understanding. I know, Lily. We'll do this together. We'll keep the heart of what we've built intact. We spent the next few weeks planning, brainstorming, and laying the foundation for this new phase. The idea of expanding our impact nationwide was both thrilling and overwhelming, but I knew that it was the natural next step. We weren't just building a business anymore. We were creating something that could change lives on a massive scale. With Jonathan by my side, I felt more confident than ever before. We began reaching out to partners, organizing new initiatives, and creating a plan that would allow us to amplify our efforts. But there was still a part of me that held back, a quiet voice telling me to remember the lessons I had learned along the way. I wasn't going to sacrifice what was important, human connection, kindness, and making a difference, just to grow bigger. As we worked through the logistics of scaling, I also made sure we remained grounded. I spent more time with the people who had inspired me in the first place, the mentors, the volunteers, and even the people we were helping. I stayed connected with the community, constantly reminding myself of the faces behind the numbers. The expansion wasn't just about reaching more people. It was about reaching them in a way that felt personal and meaningful. It was about maintaining the same level of care and authenticity that had driven me from the start. A few months later, we launched our national initiative. It was an incredible feeling to see it all come to life. People from all over the country benefiting from the programs we had built. The impact was undeniable. But as I looked at the faces of the people we were helping, I realized that the true reward wasn't in the numbers or the accolades. It was in the connections we had made along the way. I had found something more than success. I had found fulfillment in knowing that I was doing the work I was meant to do, staying true to my values, and making a difference. And as I sat in my office one evening, reflecting on everything we had accomplished, I smiled to myself. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been beautiful. I had learned so much, not just about business, but about life, about what really matters. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt ready for whatever came next. I had built something that was bigger than just me, and in doing so, I had become the person I had always hoped I could be. Someone who could make a real difference, who could bring people together, and who could continue to grow and evolve, both personally and professionally. And in that moment, I knew I had truly found my purpose. This touching story follows the journey of a young woman who rises from humble beginnings to build a business that not only thrives, but also changes lives. Through challenges, self-reflection, and a deep connection with others, she learns the true meaning of success. As she navigates the business world, she realizes that while success is important, it's the human connections and acts of kindness that bring the most fulfillment. This touching story highlights the importance of staying true to oneself while making a positive impact on the world. It is an inspiring tale about finding balance in both personal and professional life, and how one individual can truly make a difference in the lives of many. Through dedication, resilience, and a commitment to helping others. This touching story shows that even the smallest acts of kindness can have the biggest impact. Join us as we share this powerful, emotional journey that proves the heart of success is not just in what we achieve, but in how we touch the lives of others. Prepare for an emotional ride as we explore one of the most touching stories of personal growth and giving back.